One of the most innovative and influential football projects of the last 20 years, Red Bull's foray into the beautiful game has helped reshape the way the sport is played and how clubs are run. From pressing systems to the use of analytics in scouting and multi-club ownership, the Red Bull Group have helped pave the way for others, and have understandably split opinion as they've done so. But having built a reputation for being a modern, well-oiled organisation that favours innovative thinking, profitability and stability above all else, the past 12 months at flagship club RB Leipzig will have caused concern. Since Julian Nagelsmann left to join Bayern Munich in the summer of 2021, the club has hired 3 different permanent head coaches, the same number they had got through in the previous 5 years, with reports of unrest behind the scenes and wildly inconsistent form on the pitch. With former Salzburg coach Marco Rose now in place and his former Mönchengladbach colleague Max Eberl tipped to become sporting director, a position that had been left vacant for over a year, what has led Leipzig to this point? On today's EFD Explained, we're going to find out. To understand what's gone wrong at RB Leipzig, it's worth looking into what they originally got so right. While Red Bull established the East German outfit in 2009, purchasing the license of 5th-tier club SSV Markranstadt and changing their name, crest and kit before moving stadiums a year later, it wasn't until 2012 and the appointment of Ralf Rangnick as sporting director that they began building the identity we associate them with today. Back in the 1990s, Rangnick was employed as a television analyst and introduced the concept of counterpressing, or gegenpressing as it's more famously known, to German football fans, having deeply studied the tactics of Valery Lobanovsky's Dynamo Kiev and Arrigo Sacchi's all-conquering Milan. At a time when the German game was dominated by man-marking 3-at-the-back systems, zonal marking and high-pressing football were alien concepts to audiences in the country. And he implemented this philosophy to great effect as a manager, coaching young Thomas Tuchel at 4th-tier outfits Ulm before hiring him as a youth coach when he moved to Stuttgart at the end of the decade, getting Hannover promoted to the Bundesliga for the first time in 13 years in 2001, taking Schalke from 7th to 2nd in 2004-05, and establishing Minno's Hoffenheim as a force in the top flight. By the time he was hired by Red Bull, his effect on the German football landscape was there for all to see, with Jurgen Klopp's gegenpressing Borussia Dortmund side winning back-to-back Bundesliga titles and Tuchel making waves as manager of Mainz. And as the sporting director of both Leipzig and Salzburg, he not only helped revolutionise their style of play, but also their recruitment and the way the organisations were run as a whole. Over the ensuing years, the Red Bull Group developed a highly effective global scouting system that brought in young talented players who could buy into Rangnick's on-field philosophy, develop in the Red Bull system and be sold on to bigger clubs for a significant profit later down the line. Sadio Mane, Erling Haaland, Deo Upamecano, Naby Keita and Enoch Mwepu are just a few of their success stories, and they have had a similar track record with coaches too, with Roger Schmidt, Adi Hütter, Jesse Marsch and the aforementioned Marco Rose all hired by Rangnick for Salzburg before going on to bigger things, and Ralf Hasenhüttl earning a job in the Premier League off the back of his work at Leipzig. And within 5 years of Rangnick's appointment, Leipzig went from the German 4th tier to the Bundesliga and qualified for the Champions League, going on to make the semi-finals of Europe's premier competition in 2020, an achievement described by Rangnick himself as something truly rare and extraordinary. The manager responsible for that run to the semis was Julian Nagelsmann, who had first crossed paths with Rangnick 10 years earlier at Hoffenheim when he was hired as assistant coach to the club's under-17s. By 2018, he had impressed so much in his 2 years in charge of the senior side that Red Bull activated a €10 million release clause in his contract for him to take over at Leipzig the following summer. Under the prodigal coach, the side originally shaped by Rangnick not only took an immediate step up in performance, losing just 4 times and scoring a club record 81 goals in the 2019-20 Bundesliga campaign, but also began to change in style. Nagelsmann didn't so much rip up the Red Bull rulebook as refine it, introducing a more tactically flexible style of play with a bigger focus on possession. Whereas Leipzig teams of the past had stuck almost religiously to Rangnick's famed 4-2-2-2 formation, which facilitated high pressing, fast transitions and counter-attacks, Nagelsmann lined them up in 10 different formations in his first season in charge, and in his second campaign used the 4-2-2-2 just once. In 2018-19, the season before Nagelsmann took over, they averaged 49% possession, just the 8th best record in the division, and by 2020-21, they were keeping 60% of the ball, good enough for second, just marginally lower than Hansi Flick's all-conquering Bayern Munich. He may not have been able to deliver the club its first piece of major silverware, but impressed in games against a number of elite clubs across Europe, cementing his place as Bayern's #1 target to take over from Flick. But while Nagelsmann's departure for the Allianz Arena in 2021 was hardly a surprise and in keeping with Red Bull's history of seeing star personnel leave for bigger jobs, it exposed a hole in Leipzig's strategy. When he joined 2 years earlier, Ralf Rangnick actually left his position as the club's sporting director, taking on a bigger role as Red Bull's head of sport and development before leaving the company altogether in 2020. Rangnick chose Markus Krösche to succeed him in his role at Leipzig, but by the summer of 2021 he had left the club too, and a year before his contract was up, with Raphael Honigstein writing in The Athletic that he had disagreed with the club hierarchy over letting Nagelsmann and star defender Dayot Upamecano join rivals Bayern. The sporting director was quickly hired by Eintracht Frankfurt, where he replaced head coach Adi Hütter with Oliver Glasner, who had previously been on Leipzig's shortlist to replace Nagelsmann according to reports at the time. Instead, Leipzig looked inwards, hiring Jesse Marsch from Salzburg, with Deutsche Welle reporting that Christoph Freund, the long-term sporting director of their Austrian outfit, was likely to follow him to Germany. But that never happened, and the club failed to hire a permanent replacement for Frankfurt-bound Krösche, with CEO Oliver Mintzlaff taking on the extra responsibilities instead. They could have got away with it. Marsch was very much a company man, having successfully managed New York Red Bulls for 3 years before his stint at Salzburg, and in the words of CEO Mintzlaff, the club wanted to return to the core philosophy, classic RB football. But transitioning out of the Nagelsmann era was easier said than done, especially with the sales of Upamecano, Ibrahima Konate and captain Marcel Sabitzer, and Marsch's side took just 4 points from their opening 5 games. They recovered somewhat, going unbeaten for 2 months, but following a 3-game losing streak at the end of November, Marsch left Leipzig by mutual consent, with the general consensus being that the squad were failing to buy into his vision. Replacement Domenico Tedesco appeared to be the perfect remedy, quickly turning the side's fortunes around. From his appointment until the end of the season, Leipzig accrued just 3 points fewer than Bundesliga champions Bayern Munich, and kept the best defensive record in the division. And most notably, he led the club to victory in the DFB Pokal, their first major honour, as well as beating Atalanta on the way to the Europa League semi-finals. But trouble was soon around the corner. Leipzig's latest transfer window looked good on the surface, but didn't meet the needs of the head coach. According to Oliver Hartmann, chief reporter of German publication Kicker, Tedesco wanted a more condensed squad with fewer central midfielders, a centre-back who could play on the right, and a tall striker to replace injured Yusuf Poulsen. Instead, the midfield roster was increased with the signing of Javier Schlager, left-footed centre-half Abdou Diallo came through the door, and 5'11" Timo Werner returned to the Red Bull Arena. Meanwhile, his decision to turn down the offer of a contract extension beyond the following summer, preferring to wait until midway through the season instead, was said to have gone down badly with Mintzlaff, and despite the club's public pursuit of a sporting director, namely Max Eberl, the position remained vacant come the end of the summer. Following Jesse Marsch's departure the previous winter, the aforementioned Honigstein wrote that without Ralf Rangnick or his successor Markus Krösche, there's not much football competence left at the Red Bull Arena. There is nobody capable of connecting the various dots to come up with a unified strategy. This kind of statement would have been unthinkable a few years ago, but given the events of the last 12 months, it's hard to argue that Leipzig's operation has been running anywhere near as smoothly as it should. And following just 1 win from their opening 5 league games, a 4-0 defeat to Eintracht Frankfurt and a 4-1 defeat at home to Shakhtar Donetsk in the Champions League, Tedesco was sacked. And once again, Oliver Mintzlaff has turned to a Red Bull man to take up the reins in former Salzburg head coach Marco Rose, who is also a Leipzig native. An impressive 3-0 victory over Borussia Dortmund in his opening game was certainly a statement, but given the fate of the club's last 2 appointments, it's difficult to say whether Rose will still be in place by next season. Hiring Eberl as sporting director, a man who worked with Rose at Borussia Mönchengladbach, the club he transformed over a highly regarded 17-year spell, is seemingly at the top of the club's agenda, and given his excellent record would be an ideal appointment. But until that happens, it's difficult to see Leipzig regaining their reputation as one of the smartest in the business. So that was our take on what's gone wrong at RB Leipzig, but what did you make of it, and do you have any suggestions for similar videos we could do in the future? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like and subscribe to EFD if you haven't done so already. We put an explainer like this out every single week. Thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.